Hello everyone, I am your Game Master, Brooke Eyler, and welcome to our inaugural, episode of STILLHEARTH. As you can see, we do not have our players at the table today. They will come later, because right now, just you and me, we're going to go into some of the lore of the world so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on before we delve into our little story. So, let's talk about the world. There might be a map here. I'm gesturing to it if it is. So first off, we're going to start with one of our more lore-rich areas called I choked on my own spit. First, we're going to get into the Badlands, and as the name implies, the lands there are pretty bad, and not in a cool way. There are flat expanses of compacted yellow clay. It seems that no life really happens here anymore. No life grows here, there's no foliage, it's just desertous and flat and empty. Empty except for the ruins of the society that once resided there. In these ruins, we have some fun games of capture the flag or capture the territories, as all residents of the Badlands go on a little bit of an anarchical system. You want the land? Take it. Capture that flag. Take the base for yourself. Here, there are no laws. The laws are dictated by those who own the lands of the ruins. So, who's to say you're gonna get in trouble if you do a little shenaniganry in the Badlands? There are casinos, there are some more bands, but it's okay, don't worry about it. They're fine, they're chill. And a whole lot of different types of people that gather here to face a lack of judgment. No one cares in the Badlands because, you know, no laws, no judgment, it's a free-for-all. That's as much as I can get into for the Badlands for now before we see it in-game. So we're going to shift our gaze from anarchy, freedom, wild, to the bog, which might seem mystical, but is in fact a bit of a dictatorship. I'm gonna take that again because I paused on. The bog, despite what you might believe of its mystic-sounding title, is a bit of a dictatorship. Now, magic is interesting in this land. This land, and the entire campaign, is based loosely off of a setting we played for 2 years in our home game. We're very fond of it, but this is an entirely different, separate continent. And it is entirely detached from the continent we played on for 2 years and are very fond of. That means entirely different understandings of concepts, entirely different culture, and an entirely separate story that we're going to play out here. So it's very unfamiliar to our players, and very unfamiliar in that magic, where it was a lush, vibrant, accepted, and celebrated force in our home game, it still is in some places here, but those places are certainly not the bog. So the bog is very anti-magic due to the blight that could possibly have stemmed from the Badlands, where the Badlands are flat and barren for the most part. The bog is struck with somewhat of a... Sorry, anyway, hi guys, welcome back. The pools are rife with oil-slicked magic, raw arcana that can transform and alter reality around it. Reality also meaning the occupants of the land. And because of this strife, many occupants of the bog have come to outwardly despise magic. And because of that, the practice is very much limited and even outlawed in some areas of the bog. Now, of course, there are points of resistance, but you don't get that yet. We have to play it out. So, away from the bog, now moving onward to the northern forest. As you can see, the naming conventions are relatively simple and straightforward. The forest is in the north, and boy howdy is it snowy. So the northern forest in our land is incredibly, incredibly cold. This being said, it's snowing pretty much year-round with small pockets of sunlight here and there. And it is, I'm gonna say it, Vikings! I have here in my notes, all caps, Vikings! So more of a Nordic system. It's based off of a meritocracy, and there's not a lot I can tell you about the Northern Forest. because we're going to have probably most of our main story beats for our first arc occurring there, and I want to hide it for just a little bit longer, because 2 of our player characters also are from there, and we're going to find out through their backstory more lore. And I will tell you all about those player characters in a little bit once I finish out with the world lore. Wealthy folks typically reside in the north who prefer a calmer social climate than the southern coast. The southern coast is a little bit rowdier than some of the more affluent residents of this continent like, and therefore they hole up in castles and great big forts. And oh, there's a prison there. Check my notes. Big old prison. Prison in the north. You don't want to get cold, do you? You don't want to do a prison break when you could freeze to death. Might as well stay warm, am I right, guys? Okay, I'm doing great. There's gonna be a cut here. Moving on from the northern forest, which again, a very abridged version of the northern forest, we have the Lush Lands. The Lush Lands, as the name implies, are pretty darn lush. Get you a dank river valley like the Lush Lands. So stop laughing at me. This is where most of the farming in our continent happens. There are only 2 real main cities due to the fact that most of this expanse is just sprawling farmland. This is where continents, or countries rather, like the southern coast. ℂ𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕚𝕁, the main capital of the southern coast, gets most of its... Why couldn't I think of the word for produce? ℂ𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕚, the capital city of the southern coast, gets most of its produce from the Lush Lands. It's kind of a sub-country within a country. They're fine, it's a territory. They're all friends there. Very loose country lines on this one. So the Lush Lands has 2 main cities, only Ortberry Orchard and Verdant Run. Verdant Run is for training adventurers. I'll get more into the southern coast lore in a little bit, but they have a lot of adventurers. It's your typical bustling, happy kingdom, very well liked, and because of that, many adventurers hail from there, and therefore train at Verdant Run, where there's a bit more of extra space for them to hone their skills. Ortberry Orchard is an orchard. I know, shocking. One of the most famous adventurers on this continent is from Ortberry Orchard, and therefore the orchard gained a bit of notoriety and most of the major imports come out of there. We went over the farmy boys. It's time for the kingdom boys. The southern coast. This is a big one. This is where we kind of have, it is a monarchy, but there is a council. So we have a constitutional monarchy going on here. And this is because the king and his family are pretty darn well liked and have been for quite a long time. The southern coast is perched upon a series of imposing cliffs. It is a coastal town which is secure with very grandiose architecture that would be almost grotesque in its wealth were it not for the beauty inherent in the kindness of the kingdom. So we have our capital city, ℂ𝕙𝕒𝕒𝕗. The capital city is the home of the royal family, and there they celebrate holidays nearly every day. There's a holiday every single day, almost. It is quite fun, and because of that, the council has don't look at me, Tory. And because of that, the council has a royal calendar keeper. The council is comprised of guild artisans and various craftsmen so that it is ensured that the common folk get a say in everyday life. Very important, very good. We love checks and balances. Ethics, so good. Ethics are so in fashion. I have to scroll past an entire page and a half of dumb holidays. Give me a moment. Other cities that are very notable in the southern coast are the haven cities. The southern coast is very pro what I would call quote unquote more monstrous peoples, or what others would perhaps call more monstrous peoples. These include gorgons, lycanthropes, elder creatures, hexbloods or fey creatures, fled fiends, bugbears, goblins. All of these peoples may be not necessarily as well liked in other countries, than others, have a safe place in the southern coast, in haven cities. Specifically, the city is called ℃𝕗𝕗𝕗, but everyone is aware of it. Everyone has protections under the kingdom once they enter the southern coast. So, safe place for everyone, mostly, maybe. Who knows if it's a lie? We'll have to find out. Now I have to scroll on my iPad. 1 second, we're almost done. Last but not least on our list is the tropical lands, and this one's a bit of a mystery to everyone. Now, while the Central Forest, oh God, I forgot the Central Forest. Sorry, I'm talking to Editor Jessi because I love Editor Jessi. Let me get this straight right now. I love Editor Jessi, okay? Look at me, look at me. Jessi, I love you. I'm going to do the Central Forest last because that's the most important one. So the tropical lands, we don't know a lot about. Well, I do, but you don't, and neither does anyone else. The tropical lands are a bit of an enigma. There are happenings there is a lush culture there, but until we go there properly, I can't tell you. It's kind of a explorer's domain. It's still being sought out, it's still being uncovered. The mysteries that lie there are being uncovered still, and we may or may not get to the tropical lands during the course of our campaign, and we'll just have to see. Last but not least, the Central Forest. There are no known settlements within the Central Forest. And that's not odd to anyone, it's quite normal in fact. The Central Forest is used for travel, or maybe it's not. I can't seem to remember any trade routes that go through the Central Forest, but surely it's the fastest point between point A and point B, so people most assuredly travel through it. Or perhaps they don't, but some folks going home or going on an adventure surely have passed through. They most definitely have, or they believe they have, or perhaps they didn't. The Central Forest is whimsical and fun, and nothing bad happens there. And that is where we are going to set our campaign. We have siblings, Ruby and Briar, hailing from the North Forest from an ancestral castle home, adventuring for the first time outside of their comfort zones, perhaps, or perhaps not, but for fun. And we have Eris, hailing from the circus, a beautiful acrobatic firebird. And firebird, or phoenix, is perhaps an apt description because this rebirth, this birth of their persona, it's all that's truly known about them. But after a bit of an issue, let's say, at the circus, they're in need of a new home. And our final player in this cast of characters is Zimra, a anxious would-be hero fleeing from mistakes of the past and a family who perhaps expects a little bit too much. A home for all of them, all which seek it, all which desperately need a place to stay. A warm hearth. And they'll find it there in the Central Forest where we'll lay our scene. So now that we have a bit of a quick, dirty overview of the countries or territories as a whole, as well as our frickin' frack, let's talk about everyone's favorite thing. Politics! I love politics. Now, we have a bit of a kerfuffle between the southern coast and the bog. The bog, of course, despising anything inherently magical, anything whimsical, anything that could pose a danger to them and the society they've constructed via the convocation. The convocation is led by an anti-magus, who, as the name suggests, super anti-magic, my guys. So they are in a bit of a cold war with the southern coast, who encourages the exploration and experimentation with magic. They adore anything inherently magical and whimsical and seek to bolster it and celebrate it. And because of those fundamental differences and ideologies, these two places don't really get along. The Badlands, for as wild and anarchical as they are, have a slight bit of structure. The main ruins of the land which came before are structured in several different places. Now, they are on the map. They are. These areas are incredibly important because they show status and they show power. Taking hold of one of these ruins, which perhaps has information on the past, information of the society which came before that could lead to innovations in who knows what in the future. Science is cool, but in the Badlands, power is way cooler. And so anyone who owns one of these ruins, quote unquote, is seen as a figure of power. It's chaotic, but it's a system that has worked for them for over 100 years now. So we'll just have to see when we get there how well it does work. The northern forest in itself actually has some scuffles within it. It is quite politically divided amongst its different city-states, mainly because there is no overarching rule in the northern forest. It is simply a territory which exists on its own, with its own self-governing cities within them. And because of that, there are two cities towards the top of the map. They don't like each other too much, but I don't want to spoil anything. And other than that, the two more mysterious lands, the Lush Lands is governed by the southern coast, but I mentioned that. The two lands which are left are mysterious. We don't know too much about them, but the Central Forest especially, hopefully, on our little adventure together, we're going to find out a little bit more. And I think with that, we've gone over a lot of the basics. And please feel free in the comments if you have any questions about lore. I will answer them if I can. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun together on our little adventure, and I cannot wait for you to meet our players.